So you've got me and Amy today. I will start off by chatting to you about something that I am dealing with in another case at the moment. It's not the first time or the last time that this kind of thing is going to come up. So I thought I'd have a little chat to you guys about it because it does cause a lot of problems. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about is personal relationships in the workplace. Now, especially as a lot of you here today are from golf clubs, where you are often in the position where you're employing family members, you're employing couples, you're employing people who become couples. It is quite normal in the golf club to kind of employ people with close personal relationships. So, an extra little listen from you guys, please. This issue we're currently dealing with happens to not be from a golf club, but I have dealt with very similar issues from golf clubs before. So, was there a question? No? Okay. So what I wanted to discuss is, first of all, we shouldn't automatically forbid or even consider, saying that people can't have personal relationships in the workplace, because that's just not reasonable, and it just, doesn't respect people's choice. And I wouldn't be married now if I didn't have a relationship in the workplace 24 years ago. So, but it does require some attention. It requires some transparency is, I think, the important word here. So you have the situation where employees might meet at work and they become involved in a personal relationship. In this case, I'm referring to a romantic relationship, but we've also had friendships that happened in this way. And it is important, especially important if one of the partners of this relationship is a more senior employee than the other. So if they're both, if they're a barman and a waitress, it's still important. But if they are the bar manager and the waitress, we've got a different situation. Or the GM and the waitress, then we've got a different situation. So it's really important that you have something in place that requires employees to come to you and say, just so you know, it doesn't have to be formal like it is in some big organizations, the NHS and things, where you have to fill in a form and submit it to the big HR department and all of that. It just has to be something that employees must be a little bit transparent about. Also, obviously, when they're ready, personal relationships sometimes develop slowly and they might not be ready. But especially if someone is more senior than the other person, then it is important that that more senior person comes to you and say, just so you know, I am, in a personal relationship with so-and-so. The reason this is so important for someone who is more senior is because as their manager or as their HR person, it is important that you understand that they must be excluded from some processes going forward. Processes like appraisals, processes like disciplinary processes, hearing grievances, that kind of thing. The reason for that is because if they are in a position of influence and power, they may influence how that process is managed or handled. They may influence the evidence and they may influence the outcome of that process, which can, in the long term, cause issues. We find that it causes more issues when there is then a breakdown in that personal relationship than it does when the relationship is all happy and everything's going well. So that's the other thing to consider. should there be a breakdown in this personal relationship, how is the business handling that? And we actually have a policy that we don't include as standard in our handbook, because it is not something, a lot of people have said to us, oh, no, we don't want that. It sounds like we're not allowing them to have it, and that kind of thing. But actually, that policy states that your personal relationships must not impact on your work and your conduct at work. So, for example, if you employ a married couple who then break up and there's a divorce and there's children and all sorts of things, and both of them remain employed, I'm talking from a recent live case, and you then have very conflicting situations in the club. One person was more senior, one person was in a role, the other person was in a more junior role, although not working directly for that manager. But that caused a lot of problems in the club. It caused a divide, and groups were created, and it just ended up being a massive fallout. Also, considering the more senior employee actually lived on site, so the more junior employee couldn't go to work without going to the more senior employee's place, it became quite ugly and difficult. And in the end, actually, they let the more senior employee go due to some really bad conduct from him relating to how he behaved towards her in front of other people. So having a policy that clearly stipulates that you must be transparent about any personal relationships. It's not at all forbidden. Personal relationships at work can work out wonderfully, but you must be transparent about it, and you must, your conduct at work must not be impacted by your personal relationship. And this, unfortunately, includes sexual activity in the workplace, which is playing quite an active role in the current case that I'm dealing with. There has been a lot of sexual activity in the workplace in this specific case, and that is now becoming something that has come up in a sexual harassment complaint from the more junior of the two employees after the relationship was broken up. And that's actually now become something that's referenced in more than one complaint from this person. Or complaint point from this person. And do you know what? Ultimately, sex at work is gross misconduct. So this is, again, a situation where your conduct must not be impacted, or must not, be impacted by your personal relationship. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions or any horror stories that they want to share on this. But if you are interested in seeing that policy that we do have on personal relationships, and having a look at it and considering whether you want to have that added to your handbook, just let me know. We would be happy to send it to you. You can have a look at it. And if you're interested in having it added to your handbook, we can get that done for you. Okay, so I'll move on to Amy, that will talk to you about something that's a little bit less yucky to talk about.
A little bit easier to stomach. We're going to talk about references. So I've had a few queries in the last couple of weeks about references for new employees. So I thought, let's just cover references as a whole. So when should you ask for a reference? So this week I had a client that is insistent that they want to ask for references from potential candidates of a role before they even have their first interview. Now, you absolutely can do that. If you want to do that, that's fine. But I would advise that you don't. And there are two reasons for that. You are better off requesting references once you have either made an offer or you are about to make an offer to somebody. That is because Number one, potentially those potential candidates don't want their current employer knowing that they are looking at alternative roles or alternative employers. And you could potentially lose a fantastic candidate because they're too scared that their current employer are going to find out that they're thinking about leaving. Number two, if you are looking to hire, you're going to be interviewing 2, 3, maybe 4 people. If you're getting 2 references per person, that's 8 references you're going to send out before you've even started interviewing. That's a lot of admin and a lot of work for you to do before you've even started interviewing and understanding if you like these people. So I would always say, if you are looking to seek references from new employees, do it at offer stage. When you're making them the job offer, then you can then request those references and get in contact. So the next query I then had on references is, what should I expect from a reference? And our client had sent out a reference request for a potential new employee, and they'd sent out quite a long questionnaire with things like standard job title, start date, end date, reason for leaving. But they also wanted to know any absence records. Do they have any disciplinary records? What is your personal view on this person? And they were quite shocked when they got the references back, and none of those sections had been filled out by the previous employers. And it made them feel a little bit uneasy about the candidate. Now, the realistic thing is that companies do not provide that kind of level of information anymore. You might find it might happen occasionally, but 9 times out of 10, you are only going to receive a factual reference. And within a factual reference, it is going to state name, job title, start date and end date, and that is it. You are generally not going to find much more information than that. It is not a red flag. It's not something to be concerned about. That is pretty standard and generally what we would expect. You can, of course, ask any questions you want in a reference if you want to, but I think just be aware that potentially those questions or those queries are not going to be answered. And that generally is sort of a data protection thing. And that is why it's standard that we only really give out factual references. Now, on the back of that, as an employer giving a reference for an employee that has left, again, we would always advise to just stick with a factual reference. Job title, start date and end date. Don't add any further information than that. It's not worth the extra time spent to do it. And you can just whiz that off in 5 minutes. And try and get references done as soon as you can. I'm not saying that they're a top priority for you, but don't leave them waiting for weeks, because you will find that these potential new employers are going to keep chasing you for this reference. So get them done with a couple of days, get it off your desk, and then you never have to worry about it again. Has anyone got any questions on references at all?
There's one thing I just want to add to that, which people are often surprised about, is that actually an employer doesn't have to respond to your request for a reference. They don't have to give you a reference. There's no legal requirement to give a reference. It's nice, so don't become one of those employers who don't do it, because you might be impacting on that person's ability to move on in their career. But you can't let an employee go, for example, or I would strongly advise you don't let an employee go just because an employer has ignored your request for a reference, because there is no legal requirement for them to do it. And I can tell you now, the bigger the organization, the less likely it is that you're going to get that reference, because they just can't be bothered. It's at the bottom of someone's to-do list, and 3 months later they've completely forgotten. And it's just not important enough to them. Anne, you've got a question.
Yeah. Just on a comment for that, one of my jobs, I did ask for them, obviously, before I'm doing, well, it was education. And education, they've got all sorts of other questions that they put in the references that come. But I was in the position that I didn't want my current employer to know that I was looking for other jobs. And the school that I was going to, they agreed by that. And in fact, I got a phone call saying, "Can you talk?" after I'd had one interview, which was really nice. And it was a shock to the company that I was with at the time. And I didn't really want to leave, but I needed to be in a better position so that I could look after my kids. So it does work. And if the company you're going to leaves it until later, that's fine. My issue when I'm writing references is sometimes somebody is really good for a job, and if you've got people who go and all they've got is the factual things, they can't sell themselves enough in an interview if they haven't got time. So in lots of things, we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't ask the right questions. But I know we've got to ask the same questions to everybody when it comes to the interviews. I just feel that a lot of younger people, and particularly those that have got ADHD or other situations where they're not comfortable in an interview, they can't always shine. And I'm just thinking about my nephew who just said to me, Auntie Anne, all I want to do is get a job. I work hard, I'll do this, but they don't always come across in the right way. And it is very difficult. I know that we've got to do the GDPR. I know everything that we've got to do. So when I'm asked for a reference now from some of the people that have worked with me, I fill it in and then I phone the company and I just say, I hope you've got the reference. You didn't ask this, but I just want to give you a little bit more information about what they did with me and how they are. And usually, again, because it's education and they need to know a little bit more, they are happy with that and there's not been a problem. But it is easy to miss some of the references, as you say, and sometimes I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't done that. But it is hard because these questions now, apart from a CV, and if people are going through and looking for lots of jobs, you've got the AI picking up things. It's so hard for people to find the right job.
It is. And I understand your view, and I do. But I do want to say, if you do feel compelled, and please, everyone, hear me loudly on this. If you feel compelled to give more information than you're being asked for, or even just to give more information than a factual reference, please do not let a single word of that not be glowing. If you are going to give more than a factual reference, it must be an absolutely glowing reference. Okay?
Yeah.
Do not say a negative word about it, because that's where you end up in trouble. You end up in trouble where you've said something that is your opinion, or you've disclosed something you shouldn't have, and that's when you've got employees coming back to you. Steve, you've got a question.
Yeah, funny enough, it's to do with what you just said there about don't give a negative. Is it an absolute no? Because if it
depends on how much you like your checkbook.
Well, plus it's about being honest with a new employer. If you've got an employee who has been an absolute nightmare and you're actually getting the champagne out because they're leaving,
why would you give them a negative reference? My goodness, give them a positive one so they're out of your hair.
I know, but I'm an honest person. You know, if someone's a nightmare, I wouldn't want them going to somewhere else, and then you could then get them people coming back to you. Oh, cheers for that. You know, they were a bloody nightmare.
I completely understand that, Steve, especially in an industry where everybody knows each other and, you know, you kind of depend on each other's honesty in these situations. Yeah. So I really understand that. But it's not worth the potential comeback that you can have from employees if you cost them the job. And that is why it's better to just say, John worked for me from this date to this date in this job. That's right. You're then not giving a glowing reference, but you're not saying anything negative. And then it is up to that new employer to deal with John during the probation period, assess him properly, and so on. That is the most honest you can be without getting yourself in trouble.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say all my references have been glowing because I want to help these people get a job. I don't think, especially that one, would you employ this person again? I don't think I've ever had to say, no, I wouldn't. And there's one person.
I think most of us very rarely say anything other.
There's one person who, thankfully, I haven't been asked to give any references for, but the issues that surrounded them, since I've been coming in and dipping in and out of your meetings, it's things that are sort of women of a certain age, menopause, all sorts of other things that people don't necessarily know about. I coped with, and I lost when I had this person working with me, and most of my people are all self-employed. I lost money that year because I wanted to help them, and I can't pick them up again in anything because I lost money because I try and help. I don't necessarily charge for certain things that I do, and they lost me money because they weren't able to do things because they were ill or because various things like that. But this is where it's very difficult.
Stuff that you're going to disclose, is it?
No.
Yeah, you just want to protect yourself. Do we have any questions about anything else? Or more reference questions? Anything else? No?
I think your comment, just to come back, Nadia, I think your opening comments were really, really pertinent because that is so difficult, the relationships at work. And actually it follows through to everything, including the parish council things and all sorts of other areas that you're involved with. And particularly, I keep mentioning to people on the parish councils that they need to get involved and find out what else you guys have got to offer, because there is so much in the bullying and things that are happening, and there's no recognition for parish councillors. We've got no say. There's the monitoring officers and they don't do anything. The clerks, it's amazing what goes on, and people just don't realise. And so, the sessions that you do here are great, and when I can pop into them, I always take something away, and believe me, I'm a good networker, and I always tell people, yeah, you want to go here. And I know Carolyne said that you picked up one parish council fairly recently or within the last year or so, and more. It's really important that all those figures and documents. So I'm going to go back and say, we got a relationship policy in our handbook to have a look at. But thank you. These sessions I always find really, really useful.
I'm so glad you find them useful. And please keep coming.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? No? Okay. In that case, have a lovely afternoon and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want a free tribunal audit of your employment contract and handbook, click the link in the description below.